Hi, I'm Chris with Sanderson Test Prep, and we're back for the next part in our video series working with Game Lab. So here we want to introduce some kind of obstacle or object. Right now we've created a game where our plane can move around the screen, but it's not so fun to just move around unless we have something to interact with. So in this lesson we're going to take a look at how we could introduce some kind of obstacle. And that means for introducing an obstacle that we're going to have to come over here to animation and introduce something new. So here I had looked for an animal. I wanted to find a bird or something that we could come across. I didn't think it made sense to have a flying cat or a flying pig, but you're welcome to select any animal that you like. I went ahead here with this bee. And if you notice, the bee has a little flutter to it, a little animation, because you have the wings in one frame in one position, and then in the next frame in a different position. And so when you set animation, the bee will go back and forth between those two frames. And so some of the animals that you see will have the animations already included, where they have a little bit of movement. If you want to make those on your own, we can learn how to do that in future lessons. But for now, let's take a look at this b, and instead of b_1, I'm just going to rename it just b, because again, the simplicity of the naming is going to make it a lot easier when you have to introduce those things into your program. So anytime we introduce a new object or a new sprite, we're going to do certain things very similarly every time. So hopefully we're comfortable with that part now. And if you aren't, then you can always review our first couple lessons when we first develop a background and a sprite. But here we're going to have a new sprite. Let's introduce that variable. We're going to call it b, and then we're going to have to set the animation for the b. Let's bring that inside our function. So it's going to be b set animation, and we can select b from this drop down menu. And then here if I click run, so I have my bee fluttering around in the middle of the screen, and I can move around it in my plane, so I can dodge the bee. But again, an obstacle that isn't going anywhere isn't too much fun to interact with. So let's see, first of all, position-wise, is that a good place for our bee to start out? And I think that what I'm picturing in my game is that if my plane is starting out on the left side of the screen and it's facing to the right, then I want obstacles that are going to start on this right side of the screen and then come towards me. And I'm going to have to dodge by moving up or down. So instead of starting my bee in the very center, I want to start my bee maybe somewhere over here. And if I look at my x and y values, it looks like I've got an x value pretty close to 400 and a y value pretty close to 100. So if you put your cursor over the screen where you want your sprite to appear, you can use the coordinates that they show you underneath where it says reset and show grid. You can use the coordinates that they show you there in order to figure out a good starting position. So let's try an x value of 400 and a y value of 100, and let's see how that looks. Okay, so I see my bee is barely on the edge of the screen, and that's perfect. But again, he's just fluttering there, hovering in space. So I want my bee to move across the screen. So we're going to introduce something called Sprite Velocity. And so here we're going to try to get my bee to move across the screen, and I want that velocity to have a certain value. So let's bring that over into our code, and instead of sprite, remember you're going to name it whatever your specific sprite is. Here it's going to be b, and I selected velocity x because I want my bee to move from right to left across the screen. And so as you move from right to left, if you look, your x value is decreasing. So I want that to be some kind of negative velocity. So let's try maybe -20, and let's see what that looks like. So if I run my program, whoa, okay, my bee flew at me very quickly there. So let's reset that. Maybe this value is a little high. Let's try -10. See if we can slow our bee down a little bit. Okay, it's still pretty fast. I didn't have a lot of time to get out of the way. So I might even slow that down a little bit more. Let's try -7. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so that's pretty reasonable. I feel like I could dodge my B. And if I notice, my B moves across the screen, and it just moves across one time. But I want more B's to keep on coming. I want to dodge a B and then have another B come across the screen towards me. So let's see how I can get that B to repeatedly move across the screen. So what we want to do is if the B gets all the way to this left edge, then we want a new B to be created over here on this right edge so that we have this endless string of B's coming at us. So here we're going to go to control. Remember, we said if the B gets to the left edge, then we want a new B to be created on the right edge. And the way we measure where the B is by using that position, similar to what we talked about up here with the plane. So when you're looking at the left and right position, it's going to be .x for that sprite. So we're going to look at b.x, and we're going to look at a certain value of it. So here for our if statement, and again, I think that when you're adding in elements of an if statement, it's oftentimes easier to do so inside of the text rather than the blocks. So here, we're going to look at that x position, and I want my b to be reset and a new b to form when I get all the way over here to the left side of the screen. So that's when x is 0 at the very left. So here, when b.x is less than 0, once I get all the way over there, then I'm going to change that value. Then I'm going to set b.x now equal to 400, meaning I'm going to set a new b that's going to start out all the way on the right side of the screen. So if that b gets all the way to the left, then when my b gets to the left edge of the screen, it's going to, what that if statement means is that a new b will be formed now on the right side of the screen. Let's see how that works. So here I dodge my b, and then another one comes. I dodge it, and then another one comes. I dodge it, another one comes. Okay, so this is working out well. Now I have this steady stream of b's coming towards my plane, but you can see they all come in the same position. And if they come across the screen from right to left in the same position every time, well then my airplane could just fly right here, and I don't really need to interact much to continuously dodge those b's. So we want the b's to appear at different spots, some a little higher, some a little lower, when they first get introduced. And so here, the way that this is going to work is we're going to introduce a functionality called random number. And we're going to use that random number value along our y-axis so that the b will appear at a random place vertically. So instead of being introduced at the same spot each time, which right now is at 100 for its y value, we want this to be a random number. And so let's talk about the way that a random number function is going to work. So when you have random number is going to allow you to set a value to appear at any value within a range of values. So for our y value here of 100, if we have it set to 100, it means the b comes across the screen at that same place every time, which we don't want. So let's see what a random number would allow us to do when we set this value. And we want to do it in two places, both in line 3, where we have a y value of 100. We want that to be randomized. And then also, line 24 has the b restarting at the right of the screen, but we want to add another line in line 25 where we're also going to randomize the y value of where the b restarts. So when we create the new b after it exits the screen. So let's try the random number function. I'm going to show it to you as a block. So if we go back to our blocks here, instead of 100, your random number, so if it's a number, let's think of where that might be. And we might intuitively think it's in the math functions, and it is. So under one of the math operations that we see here, we see a random number, and it has the minimum and maximum value. So let's drag that block over here. And let's think about where we want that to appear. And so you can move your cursor around like we've done previously and see what the approximate values that you want to be. So here you want it to be maybe close to the top, right? So a value, of maybe 10 or 15, should be like kind of the smallest y value up here. So the b would enter the screen at this part. And then you want it to go maybe down to around where this mountaintop is. So maybe 200 is a good cap on that y value. So let's try from 10 to 200. And we'll do the same thing down here. We'll add in the sprite y value. So we have the b.x. Let's take a look at b.y. And let's set that equal to the same thing, a random number between 10 and 200. And let's rerun our program and see what that looks like. So the first b is up there. The second one, oops, it's a little lower. Oh, lower yet. Okay, now we have our b's approaching us at these different kinds of y values. So those y values are getting randomized each time. So this is creating a little bit more unpredictability in our game and making it a little bit more like a true game, where we have the opportunity to then interact with and dodge the bees as they come across the screen. So that's the key to being able to make the bees cross the screen. But if we look, we see something interesting happen. When our bee hits our airplane, seems like nothing kind of happens, right? The bee just sort of flies right through the plane. So in our next lesson, we're going to take a look at something called a set collider function, but we're going to take a look at the way that we can make the plane interact with the bee, where when it actually hits the plane, something happens, and that can be whatever we set it to be. It could be it adjusts our score, it could be it causes an explosion, it could be we lose a life. So there's a lot of ways that we can make that happen with the interaction with the plane using something called a set collider function, and that's what we'll take a look at next. So please stay tuned to our upcoming videos, and thanks for watching.